Hey and welcome, I'm Solo and this is ZN Gaming. In this video I'll be going over if a capture card can help in a one PC setup. Before I waste any more time, let's jump into it. So if you've ever asked yourself if a capture card will help your stream or game performance, we are here to find out the answer to that. I've been asked, does it help FPS? Does it help FPS lows? Does it help with smoothness? Does it help with the highs? So I set up a few tests to see what I would find, and the results are interesting. So let's take a look at if it helps to have a capture card in a one PC setup. The system I'm using for this is an Asus TUF Gaming B650 Plus Wi-Fi motherboard with a Ryzen 9 7900X on the AM5 platform with about 32 gigabytes of DDR5 6000 speed RAM. The GPU I'm using is the 3080 Ti, so that's what we're going to be using as the test bench today. To test this out, I used 3D Mark for benchmarks. Games that were used were Apex and Call of Duty. I will be adding more games to the testing in the future. This is more or less just to get my test bench set up. More really was not needed for this here example. Each test was run 4 times with the capture card and 4 times without the capture card. This was done while streaming and while not streaming. All that was streamed live on Twitch on ZNS bot account. For the results, all 4 results were added together and divided by 4 to make an average of them, just to stop anything like run-to-run variation and making it look like more or less when in reality it was a spike, and to prevent me from picking just the top results from each, as I thought that would not be very real world numbers to pick just the best out of the 4. That being said, first I'll go over the benchmarks with the 3D Mark. As you can see, the 0.1% lows and the 1% lows are the same, and the max FPS was the same each time. But it looks like the FPS and the average were different every run, sometimes actually by a lot. So for the 4 to 7 FPS in the difference, we do actually consider this here just a run-to-run variation. If you run a benchmark 5 times in a row, you're going to get a variation anywhere from 1 to 7 FPS is actually perfectly normal. Now, I wanted to make sure I tested this in game so that I would actually have some real-world results, even though I kinda had a good idea what the answer is. I let the PC cool down for an hour, I turned it on and started streaming, and I loaded up Apex. And here we see much of the same thing, the 0.1% lows and the 1% lows pretty much the same, and the average FPS being 1 to 4 in the difference run to run. The only difference here is the FPS. It was running at 30 plus in the difference. For this one, we're going to ignore the max FPS because the max FPS is measured by the peak that it hit during that time. So even though it might have only just been there for 0.0 of a second, it's going to count the highest FPS that it achieved. This can be anywhere from spikes loading up, assets loading and stuff like that, making a big variation in difference. So I want to make sure that I point that out, that the max FPS was only hit for even a microsecond at a time. Can make the numbers look drastically different. So we're going to ignore the max FPS for this one here. The last game was COD. Now this one showed the most difference, and I run the test a few extra times just to double check things, and this is when I seen it. OBS was using more resources to run the video capture than the screen capture was using, and the screen render time in OBS sitting at like 1.5 to 2% from its normal screen capture of 0.5%, making the CPU jump up and down quite a bit more. I'm not sure if this was because Elgato's default settings added the capture card at full 4K, or what was going on with the capture card. And with a capture card, you can't really use things like game capture that gains a bit of performance by not capturing your desktop, but you can when you're not using one. So actually, the performance loss here could have been gained up by just adding a game capture instead of screen capturing. So I had to run a lot more tests, and I seen the results close to the same as each other. I turned OBS off and run the same test and seen absolutely zero difference in FPS at all. But you just showed me it hurt performance, some of you might say. Now, some of those numbers are a bit misleading, and I wanted to showcase how not only does it not help with performance or FPS averages, lows, or highs, but that it can actually impact performance in a negative way. Now I can explain why we're seeing a difference in FPS in the chart here. The capture card is close to the GPU and blocks some of the airflow. By run 4, it was about 95 degrees and throttled my GPU. I left this in the test to show that sometimes upgrading can cause less performance depending on your layout inside of your PC due to airflow, water cooling, and also the Elgato software running in the background. I suggest not to install this here. It actually uses 1 to 3% 50% of your CPU just sitting in the background doing nothing, and uses some of your RAM as well. So I'd actually suggest not to install it if you don't need it. And I also suggest hide the preview in OBS. This fixed most of the inconsistencies with my testing, but this was with the benchmark and not very real world. I guess neither is leaving the side panel off when you're playing games. Without the capture card, my GPU never got above 88 degrees, and with it in, my GPU got 95 in the benchmark test. But this is only the benchmark test that the thermal throttled my GPU. But again, this is a benchmark, not very real world. No one is going to sit there and pump everything to max over and over and over again to see what they get for a score. So I did the test again a few more times and found close to the same numbers with just a 1 to 5 FPS in the difference. The lows and max stayed the same with only a 1 to 3 in the difference at max run to run, which is absolutely normal to have. There's going to be a little bit of inconsistencies. 1 to 5 FPS is always going to be a difference run to run. So does a capture card help in a one PC setup? Actually, no, it doesn't help at all. It makes absolutely zero difference to have the capture card in a one PC setup, and it even can harm performance, as we found here, by blocking airflow. It added 10 more watts of power to the max watts under load, and it just being more efficient for you to actually screen capture over using the video capture within OBS. If you're going to spend $200 on something to help with FPS, I suggest saving a bit more and spending it on something that will actually give you some real gains, like a better GPU or CPU, maybe even a good 2K 240 hertz monitor that your system and your setup can grow into. And if you're just looking for gains and a bit more performance, you can go over to OBS and disable the preview window. This alone will gain you 7 to 10 FPS for free, and that's a lot more than the $200 capture card is going to gain you for a one PC setup. A lot of people forget that your video card still has to do all of the encoding inside of OBS, and no matter what you do to try and get away from it, as long as you only have a one PC setup, your one PC is still going to have to do all of the encoding. It's going to still have to send the video and receive the video, and all that's still done by your computer. So if you don't have a capture card or a second computer with a capture card in it, you're not offloading anything. Usually a capture card, the basic use for them is so that you can put it in another PC. You can add the 10 watts to it, you can add the extra load to it, and then you can offload all of the stuff your OBS would normally be doing over to that second PC. That's what the capture card is for. It's not for capturing the game on your computer. Your computer's always going to be more efficient at capturing things that are on it without an extra piece of hardware like a capture card. If you happen to have a console or another computer though, if you're console gaming, it's going to be a big help because you'll be able to use OBS with your console. But if you don't have a second PC or a console, this is definitely not recommended. It is not going to help you any at all. The only thing that I found that it added to my single PC setup was more power usage, less airflow, and provided no real benefits unless, like I said, you had a console or a second PC to use with it, maybe a tablet or other game system, at least something else that you're going to be capturing, and even a 4K camera. So if you have a real camera like a Canon or a Sony, and you're using the HDMI out so you can have 4K, that is another use that a capture card will actually benefit you. But just adding it to OBS is going to be the same problems. Everything that you add to OBS is going to stack on some performance that it's going to use in OBS. And I found if you're adding things in 4K, if you're adding multiple video sources, you are going to run into things. You are going to add a bit of time to your render time. I did find this here more so with the video capture than the screen capture, that it's just going to add a little bit of your average render time is going to get bigger and bigger. So that's how long it takes for you to render a frame. And the normal is 0.5 to a 1. If you're adding anything 4K or anything close to that, it's going to add a 1.5 to a 2 milliseconds. So that's not very long to each frame rendered. Other than that, again, there is absolutely no benefit to having the capture card. And I just wanted to make sure that I covered this in a video. I'm going to do quite a bit more testing on it. I did this with both the Elgato 4K 60 and the AverMedia Live Gamer 4K. I actually found the exact same results with both of them. Adding them as the video source used a bit more resources than what I would have normally used if I was just screen capturing. I don't know if that's because OBS added them at max settings that the capture card can handle when my video output from my computer is only 2K. So that might be an OBS issue is why I've seen some of the inconsistencies. Without OBS open though, the results are exactly the same. And it's $200 worth of actually no performance gains. There's no performance gains here at all. But that's it for this one here. If you think I forgot or left something out, definitely leave it in the comments below. And if you like or found the video helpful, hit the thumbs up and get subscribed for more content. Thanks for watching. Bye!